Dyer wave
3.
Our anthropology is not derived by human psychology or, empirical data from MIT or something like this. It's derived from the revealed aspect of what we see in Christology. And so there's no real way to diagnose man's problem and to understand man and man's anthropology, as I said, without the right theology. Logos is the icon of the Father, and man is the icon of God. We are the image of God.
Dyer wave
3.
What's up? How am I hearing my own show? All right. Shut up. Tell myself to shut up. My altars talking to each other, having a debate. The altars in my heads debate each other. Who's the better debater of the altars in my head? That's the real question. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be doing experimenting. Mad science. Plastic tubes and pots and pans, bits and pieces, and the magic from my hands are making weird science. Ooh, something like a recipe. Diagrams and charts, mending broken hearts. We're making weird science. Ooh. It's my creation. Is it real? It's my creation. I do not know. I think really the best responses that we get is when I just sing and just act like a dang fool. Acting like a fool. and I get that super chat dancing monkey money. Dancing monkey money. I get that dancing monkey money from my pay piggies. Remember that term, pay piggies? That always cracked me up. The first time I saw what a pay piggy was, it was this portly lady who would get paid. Got my dandruffs coming off. Would get paid to insult people. I mean, like the men's who like the insults. There is a fetish. Did you know that? It relates to wanting some skanky chick to cut you down, just insult you. She wasn't even good at insults. Because I tried it for like $50. Ha ha ha. Just kidding. I didn't do it. I watched her videos on YouTube because they have public videos. I was like, what's a pay piggy? And her thing came up. And you could get paid to insult people. Anyway. I love my pay pig. I love my pay piggies. That's what she said. She said, I love my pay piggies. And no, she was not an African American woman. So I can make fun of her. She was a Chalkazoid. She was from the Chalkanon Peninsula. Do you know the word Chalkazoid? That's people from the Chalkazoid Peninsula. If you didn't know your history and your geopolitics. So we're going to be having fun. Dude, we're just going to be just damn talking, boy. We're just going to be chatting, jiving, Java and jiving, talking, yapping. Because that seems to be the funnest. I mean, this is when I feel my funnest, my realist, not my anti-realist. This is when I feel my realist, when I can just joke with y'all, have fun, and we'll talk about some real things too. Like, first thing I want to talk about, maybe I'll just talk about like the movie that I watched and the book that I read. What if that was the name of the show? The movie that I watched and the book that I read the night before or that day. I don't even know. The challenge has always been, what is the right format for doing this? I don't know. So we're going to experiment with daily. Maybe it'll work. We'll see. And if not, I'll just do it the way I've been doing it because that works fine. But there's enough material out there. There's enough stuff we could talk about that you could do it every day if you wanted to. And maybe that's the way to go about it. Maybe you could grow a channel quicker that way. So what I want to talk a little bit about is my tonight's book report for the Chad nerds in the audience. Let's talk a little bit about, you know that chick named Shama? Have you heard of Shama? You know what she's into? Some weird stuff. They call it shamanism. We're going to talk a little bit about Mircea Eliada's shamanism. And that's a girl that he met and did not treat him right. We got that spurgatism going, and we're going to investigate some shamanism. Now, the point here is not really to go through this whole book. Just some things that I wanted to note that I found fascinating in this book. That the only time I brought this up was on a podcast, probably 5 years ago. And I thought, man, yeah, the daily spitball report is more like it. Right? You get a spitball of information. And everybody is so like lazy and they can't keep their attentions spanned long enough. That what if we tried it a little bit shorter? What if we keep it down to an hour? We'll see if we can do it. But brew hose, not hose, brew hose. And that is not when a lady of the evening learns to brew beer. A brujo is one of them Mexican terms for a shaman, a down under shaman. And this book is written by one of the foremost comparative religion scholars in the world, Mircea Eliade, and he approaches this from an academic standpoint. But one of the things that pops up is the patterns. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. The patterns of religious archetypes in terms of initiation, the mysteries of the initiations of the shamans. And the book begins by saying, hey, spirits, that's in the Old Testament and that's in the New Testament. So we know that even with religion in terms of Christianity, even with world religions, there's overlap here in terms of the idea of a vast trove of spirits. It is like the bestiary of Final Fantasy, right? There's just a vast trove of the world religions, of demons, gods, spirits, forces. And Eliade, as we know, actually has a really good series, a whole 3-part series I've got over here. History of Religious Ideas, which was really good. I read Sacred and the Profane, which was really good by Eliade. And the shamanism book is good too. And now I know you may think I'm a shaman, but I'm not a shaman. You may have mistaken me for coal walking, right? You would have thought that dude has probably crispy feet because he looks like he does coal walks. You may think that I don't know, float when I sleep. What do shamans do? Like, what I'm trying to think of what are the characteristics of shamanism. You may think that I was into this kind of stuff. I never was. I never had any kind of shamanic phase. A lot of people love this stuff. They're going crazy over it. And as you know, we always unfortunately have to pop people's bubbles by telling them what's really going on, because people don't think that ideas are trafficked, that ideas promote the agenda of the system, and that they're promoted oftentimes for a reason. Not every idea, not everything is controlled, not everything is that way, but a lot of things that get popular or are popularized happens on purpose. And the revival of shamanic traditions, the archaic revival, primalism. I don't mean beautiful Tristana and primal edge health. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about that there's something inherently better to something old. Not necessarily. I read about a tribe over in the Southeast Asian region that I'm not joking, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just the realities of the real world. So people who get their feelings hurt so bad, we're gonna have to be grown-ups, put your big boy pants on. The old man shaman, he would initiate the young men by an action with his dong, if you understand what I mean. And that's a real tribe I read about. So people fussing about the Bible. I mean, aren't you glad you grew up in the West, where hopefully you didn't have to be dong initiated when you turn 13? I mean, I hope. I don't know. But Eliade said, you know what, when I looked at all of these religions, I saw patterns. And I don't know how to explain it, but guess what? We can explain it because the spiritual world is real. And I'm not saying that everybody who smokes DMT or whatever, that or does mushrooms, that they're necessarily immediately becoming possessed, or that they're necessarily going to see the demons or anything like that. But I think that the patterns that we see in the ancient usage of hallucinogens, LSD, and all that does demonstrate this. And of course, I am not a proponent of these things. So I do not advocate these things precisely because I had bad experiences with these things when I was a young man. And now that I'm a senior citizen, getting that 60% discount at Captain D's, I can't go up in there tripping. I can't have a bunch of mushrooms and go pound a pound of cod. can't do that. Your stomach, by the way, will not handle it either. I mean, the cod's coming back up. I'm joking, by the way. I'm not a senior citizen, and I do not eat at Captain D's. So one of the patterns that obviously emerges is the consistent, not just the recognition of spirits and demons, but out-of-body experiences. And so if the drug experience, here's my theory here, my thesis, is only a chemical reaction up in the noggin, and it's not something that's a real sort of touching base with something spiritual, it doesn't make sense why we would see the same patterns in the people that underwent the shamanic drug trip or the initiation, right? But yet across cultures that in the ancient world, medieval world, whatever, that never had contact with one another, there's the same pattern. This is just fascinating to me. And what that speaks to, I guess, in my view, is just simply that it's not a purely physiochemical situation going on. There's actually a reality beyond the immediate world, the spiritual world, the noetic realm, the spiritual realm, where there are spirits. Now, I don't know if it's the whole bestiary of Final Fantasy, but, however it is, there's demons, there's angels, there's spirits. That's the point here. And he says, right away, the whole world's shamanic tradition includes things like the experience of the demonic. We're going to get into some fascinating things that pop up, right, in these patterns of these traditions. But both good and evil spirits is a universal pattern, as well as the trance states, which is fascinating. And we're not going to be going through this whole book. We're just going to hit some highlights that I thought were really fascinating. And when he gets to the section where a lot of tribes have tried to explain perhaps epilepsy, that was seen as something demonic. And we have intimations of that in the New Testament. But another pattern is that the shaman is believed to be chosen by the gods. So that perhaps this could be a previous shaman, right, who has the trip and says, the spirits told me it's that boy over there, right? Perhaps it could be some other way, right? The bones. We've all seen Willow. The bones. Willow. The bones tell me nothing. Remember Willow? Perhaps there's just an old short dude who throws some bones around, and then he says, boom, it's you, Willow. Willow Ufgood is the next chosen one. I don't know. But regardless, these are patterns that we see. And so next he goes on to talk about the shamanic tradition in terms of initiation and the sickness that occurs in dreams. Well, I've been having crazy dreams lately. I don't know if it's just crazy foods. I don't really eat crazy foods. I mean, I eat the same foods I always eat because of my spurgy diet, because I'm Spurgatron 5000. I don't know. With gut blowing up in the Middle Ages, in my middle 20s period, I had a nuclear gut meltdown, and so beautiful Tristana, who is, of course, more beautiful than either Jordan Peterson or Michaela Peterson. Beautiful Tristana, and that triad there, the divas, that triad of divas of Jordan Peterson and Michaela and Tristana Haggard all led me into bowel salvation. I prayed the bowel sinner's prayer with all three of them, and it worked. They healed me. So Tristana gets 7 zillion Bitcoin. Because what does it profit a man to trade his guts for the world, right? Would you trade your guts for the world? Willow. Now, another pattern that we want to point out that is consistent is the notion of illness and trauma. So the role of the shaman in the tribe is typically to figure out why is Uncle Sally puking, right? Uncle Sally, he's been puking the last week. He's been chewing on some branches. Why is he throwing up all week, right? He's been over there, sipping on some of that jungle juice, and he's been puking all week. Why? Well, let's ask the shaman. He's got telephone to the next world. So he goes into the trip, ecstatic states and trances, as we said, are another common pattern. And most of the time, there's going to be these weird patterns of, for the initiation of the shaman or someone being initiated, the ritual dismemberment. That's the crazy part. In one case of one dude, it was a freaking mama bird that chewed him up and spit him out. In another case, it's a demon who had a big old pot and cut him up. I'm not joking. These are just examples of stories that he gives in different ancient traditions, and the accounts of how they were dismembered. But what's interesting is that this seems to be pretty common. This is a common pattern, that when you are first initiated as a shaman, to become the one who can, do the medical diagnosis to the spirit world, from the spirit world. The primitive idea was that they needed to figure out which spirits were responsible for whatever illnesses in the tribe. And so the shaman has to undergo the ritual death, burial, and resurrection, so that in a way he can see and know what's going on, and he's no longer bound by these things, right? So in other words, it's like a form of a death, burial, resurrection, which I believe is why so many religious traditions have the death, burial, resurrection. It ultimately goes back, I think, to scripture and the idea of the resurrection, right? But in the pagan traditions, this is all kind of muddled and mixed up with a bunch of superstitions. And so we need knowledge. We need secret knowledge from the ether. And that's what the shaman is going to give us. But he first has to go these terrible trials, undergo these terrible trials and dismemberment ritual, and then be put back together. Like in one case, it's a bird chews you up and vomits you back out. But somehow what's vomited back out kind of forms into a gingerbread of you, like a bird vomit gingerbread man cooked back into reality. And then you're back when you come out of the trip, and you are initiated. And this is common, Eliade notes, between ancient shamanic traditions amongst druids in the UK to the fakirs in India. What we note is that most of these rites have the ideas of terrible, hellish initiations, dismemberments, interactions with the demonic, and some writers even believe that this refers to the fragmentation of the psyche itself. So it's not just you're symbolically in the spiritual world or your body is cut up. This is your psyche. This is the soul, basically, or the spiritual aspect of you in the spiritual realm getting katana bladed up like the samurai. Cut you up into pieces. You're fragmented. And it's interesting that fragmentation of the psyche, doesn't that fit very well with the notion of demonic possession? I'm not saying that they're always necessarily identical, but there does seem to be a relationship here because, of course, that fragmentation, everybody knows is connected to trauma. And Eliade even notes that the splitting and fracturing of the psyche in the case of the shamanic tradition also typically can relate to shamanism. Sometimes the shamans themselves become traumatized and or possessed. And I forgot to mention, too, that it's also a descent. There's a death, burial, descent, resurrection, and ascension pattern to the shamanic traditions. Fascinating. There's also the notion of cannibalism and the ritual meal. Those are parts of many of these traditions. And again, kind of hearkening to what you notice in the Christian tradition is this idea that we can, when the healing of the psyche is largely to do with the reintegration of the psyche. So that there's that great book, Orthodox Psychotherapy. Yeah, this will go into some of that and talk about how not just trauma, but kind of sin itself, right, has the tendency to fracture us. And that part of the healing process is the reintegration of the fractured aspects of the psyche due to sin. Okay, so I'm not talking Carl Jung stuff, even though there's a little bit of overlap. That's not exactly what that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from the Orthodox perspective of the soul, the psyche. I'm just saying that there's overlap with the shamanic tradition. So that's where Carl Jung and people like that, right, they come to this and they say, oh, look, because there's patterns and there's similarities, they're all saying the same thing. And as we saw, that is the fallacy outlined, for example, in the Garraby paper, that just because there's similarities between things does not mean that they are either the same or that there's a higher unity that's above all of the instantiations. That's just an assumption. So, am I taking questions? I'll take questions. But I take questions from Super Chats. So, if you want to ask me a question, here is Super Chats. And you can ask me a question there. So I wanted to talk a little bit more now about religion as manipulation and TV preachers and all that, because when you read the book about the shamanic tradition, you can kind of tell that, which is not to say that everything about it is fraud and scammery, but a lot of superstitious beliefs that we might find in the shamanic tradition, they're wrapped up in some truths, half-truths, and then they're also... a lot of the shamanic dudes are con men, right? Beautiful Tristana has talked about this for several years now, that when you do these, when boomers go down to Ecuador and Peru, they pay like $3,000 for some, wily old brujo to bomb their minds with DMT or whatever, shrooms, and then they get their wives felt up, basically, is this, and they're paying like $3,000 for this like special guided ritual or whatever. And all I'm trying to point out is that if you remember when we read Tim Leary's, what was it, Tibetan book of his analysis of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that whole book is just like a manual for you to be a cult leader shaman. You be a little cult leader shaman, dude. And that's kind of a primal form of manipulation and tactics, right? And we know that, sure, there were a lot of shaman that were con men and liars. And if you remember in Apocalypto, I like that scene in Apocalypto where, like, the Aztec priests, they just know that there's going to be, right, an eclipse. And they have duped and kept all the people in, just total degradation and confusion and superstition. And so that's a great example of a religion that was basically completely about keeping the people in the dark and degrading them, right? Because of the human sacrifice going on in that movie and in those rituals. And that's precisely why I think that in the MK Ultra experiments and tests and studies, Gordon Wasson was sent by J.P. Morgan and the Macy Foundation to go down to these areas, Latin, South America, Mexico, to look for the entheogens and the drugs that the shamanic traditions there used. And that's because they had such a powerful effect, right? I mean, what greater form of mind control could there be than, give me your firstborn because there's going to be an eclipse and the sun god's going to be mad if we don't feed him your firstborn. And that's total mind control, right? Yes, it's possession, but it's total mind. It's like the ultimate mind control. Thus, we could see why people who are dysgenics, depop people, right, at the top. Well, yeah, that's like the perfect religion, right? That's the real secret of the earth religions. Let's bring that back, man. And then, that's where we get the, chomping on people. Butt jerky, right? Chomping down. I'm not joking. That goes on. People do this. I can't say these words. It's so ridiculous. You can't even talk, right? Just the utter absurdity of not being able to speak and confess your thoughts and use the actual words that stand for things. I mean, dude, the dystopia is now. This is the dystopia. Make no bones, get it? Make no bones about it. The bones tell me nothing. All right. So what was all that drug stuff? Well, that was about religious manipulation and how ancient shaman knew how to swindle people. Did you ever think about the ancient shaman men as swindlers? Yes, they had religious demonic experiences. But they was a bunch of creeping creepers as just as much as creeping creepers today, dude. Did you not know that? And so when Tim Leary writes his Creeping Creeper book, telling you how to creep and creep on the boomers that come to your drum circle, it's the same principle. It's just the micro scale, macro scale of con men and manipulators and liars and cult leaders, really. So the shaman is really just kind of his own little cult leader. And guess what? Do you think a TV preacher is any different than a shaman? And I have to apologize because I don't know what happens with my hair, but if I don't consistently cut my own hair, I get this bad case of TV preacher hair. So I apologize because I'm about to make fun of Jim Bakker and I got freaking TV preacher hair. So I'm a hypocrite and I admit it. But I wanted to talk about that because we did a Rokfin stream, which was great if you missed it, by the way, on the scam of TV preachers. And we went through, not the stream that we did on Business Church. That was a lot of fun. But the stream over on Rokfin about TV preachers. Right. And what's fascinating is that it's pretty easy to discern in a lot of these cases that these people are in some way allied with elements of the shadow gov, right? The deep STATE. They're in that deep state of being, if you know what I mean. And when did I first encounter this idea? This is a good question. Okay, so the first time I encountered this idea was maybe 10 years ago. And I remember reading about Dan Mitrione and him being, CIA stuff going on down in Brazil, Peru with World Vision. And that Mark David Chapman, right, for a time was trying to be some kind of weird evangelical missionary person. And that he was doing some kind of work in that around that type of thing. And a lot of people point to this in the Mark David Chapman, John Lennon story as a sus. It's pretty sus, dude, right? And then I remember reading more and more about missionaries and the history of espionage. Oh, actually, turns out many missionaries were spies. That's a classic cover. As is aid worker, as is Red Cross, as is USAID. Right? These are classic intelligence front covers. And then this, if you get into the academic literature on this, this is you start to notice it, right? And so it's no different, what I'm trying to say, with the moral majority people and all of that stuff from the 80s. That was an Oliver North, Reagan, Kissinger cooked up plan to co-opt the right-wingers in a way like, a lot of the left was co-opted by various groups and foundations. CFR, for example, for the left, and that kind of liberal attitude in terms of the East Coast elite. And then you've got this fake right-wing moral majority that was also just as phony baloney. And, it included Falwell. It included a lot of these high-level evangelical pastors at that time. And it even included in the Cold War Billy Graham, right? Billy Graham was very close to the CIA in terms of being a figure that they saw that could be an asset to project Americanism against the Soviet Union. So on the one hand, I'm not trying to be unfair to the Cold War boomer era period, because I know that a lot of those people were caught up in things that they believed were genuine, and I'm not saying that the Soviets were good because they had their own atheistic approach. I'm just trying to say that this Machiavellian pragmatic approach is not really interested in Christianity. That's what I'm trying to say, right? I mean, who actually believes that these people were, maybe at one point they were, right? And that's what I'm going to get to this movie that we watched that was pretty good. The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Now, it's a little, what the right word is. I mean, so I'm pretty impressed when movies are able to pick these weirdos out of history and do them perfectly. So Jessica Chastain plays Tammy Faye Bakker perfectly. And when I saw this trailer, I was like, that's not going to work. How is she going to be that? She doesn't look anything like her. And Andrew Garfield plays Jim Bakker perfectly. I mean, there's some really funny parts in this movie too, by the way. But what isn't as clear, it's just kind of subtly hinted at, and they do it from that like, oh, the Democrats are the good guys telling the truth perspective, and the bad guys are the Bush, Oliver North, Falwell, Reagan, neocons. But it's just ironic because that's exactly what we've been talking about in in both the Business Church live stream and the TV Preachers live stream that Jamie and I did over on Rokfin, which is Rokfin only. But we noticed that, like, so even in this movie, you've got the hinting that, because Jerry Falwell starts hanging out with Pat Robertson and Jim Bakker and these just goober like TV preachers, dude. It's hard to believe these people are real. It's like, are these real people? Like they seem like puppet characters. And there's a weird reference in the movie to puppets because they give the impression that Tammy Faye Bakker was traumatized by her just mean mom. She had this just horrible mom, and that this made her seek validation and love from others. And so she was just craving this attention and publicity all the time because she didn't have the love that she deserved at home or whatever. And so she got into puppet ministry. And if you don't know about the world of evangelicalism, if you're a Baptist, or when I grew up as a kid as a Baptist, there was puppet ministry. And I remember telling friends about this, and they just died laughing. They couldn't believe this was a real thing. It's like puppet ministry. It's like, yes, this is like a big part of, if you grew up Southern Baptist in the South, is going and watching these goofy puppets. Like sometimes they're playing out biblical stories. I don't know. It's just puppet ministry. That's a big. It used to be a big thing. I don't know. Does that still go on? I mean, maybe the evangelical churches will just be puppets for adults. I mean, they might as well just be at that point. I mean, I know Pope Francis does puppet masses, which is essentially the same thing Roman Catholics basically doing. Maybe they could all get together, right? And there's something kind of like symbolic in that, isn't there? Puppet ministry, puppet masses, puppets. They're puppet. Oh, shit, puppet. From those idiot pirates, right? From Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh, it's that puppet. Not puppet. Puppet. Is a puppet the same thing as a puppet? I don't even know. You guys are geniuses. My audience is literally like 200 IQ minimum. You get the mods immediately boot you if you're not, like minimum 200 IQ. So I know my audience knows, but I don't know. But anyway, so Tammy Faye Bakker got this idea to do all these puppets, and she just acts like a freaking goofus, dude. She's a 100% living incarnate goober. And she meets Jim Bakker, who is the male version of 100% goober. I mean, I have to, again, I give them credit because they play these roles so well. But as you're watching this movie, you'll start to notice that, they're kind of puppets too, right? Are they puppets to their narcissism, to their ego? Are they puppets to their lack of love that they never got, and their emotional, seeking validation? Are they puppets to the money that this bizarre ministry just starts accruing? And so I started reading about Jim Bakker, because I don't know anything about Jim Bakker, dude. This was 80s. Okay, so I was like 7 years old when this was on. And literally only like the most naive, simplistic boomers would have ever fallen for this stuff, right? The Praise the Lord TV show that he had. Well, it turns out his show became like the number 3 cable show in the whole country, which is crazy. And he was reaching, what did he say? 20 million people at one point. Praise the Lord, live from North Carolina. And he builds this gigantic thing, as they all do. This is the older phase of the megachurches, right? This is megachurches before megachurches, which is, we talked about Robert Schuller and the Crystal Cathedral and all that nonsense. And then that gave birth to these dudes. Oral Roberts, Jimmy Swaggart. I don't even remember them all. But Pat Robertson. So Pat Robertson started doing it early too, right? So he had his black and white TBN show, and that actually got what's his name? Jim Bakker interest. So Jim Bakker's like, oh, I want to be Pat Robertson. I'm gonna be that dude, right? And whoever they got to play Pat Robertson plays him. Well, he plays him perfectly because the Lord's talking right now, and somebody's got a gout that needs to be healed because I've got diamond mines in Africa, and I need to fund those special trips for the intelligence agencies down to Africa. That's my Pat Robertson, by the way. I think Pat Robertson is one of these obvious examples of, right, somebody who, I mean, this dude, this is like totally part of this neocon CIA evangelical thing. And I remember reading various books back in the day too. I remember this. So actually the first time that I encountered this idea was not 10 years ago reading about Mark David Chapman and Dan Mitrione. It was about Pat Robertson a long time ago when evangelicals started noticing, because I would used to read these kind of evangelical expose things. And they started noticing his connections to all these high-power government figures, and that it looks like perhaps these ministries and the diamond mines that he has, with the pastors owning giant diamond mines. This is just crazy. Had to be, right? This is just screams like CIA front, right? For who knows what, all kinds of things. Anyway, so back to Jim Bakker. So Jim Bakker wants to be this guy. And I knew nothing about Jim Bakker and this stuff. So I went and read a bunch of articles on him and stories. And that was fascinating. So that's what I was doing yesterday. Reading more about TV preachers and trying to figure out how I can build my own ministry to y'all sweet people. I'm trying to mimic the best, to be your e-minister. Could I do it? I think if I really wanted to, I mean, it wouldn't work now because I just told you that. Could I pull that off? Like, could I be a mega church evangelical dude? Maybe, probably. It doesn't look very hard. Like the hardest part seemed to be like whenever their scandal comes out, right? Like so obviously these people are compromised too. I think that's another part of it. And the movie hints at that. The movie says, there's this point where Jerry Falwell comes to Jim Bakker and he's like, we want you to hop on the moral majority politics thing. And Jim Bakker's like, I don't want to do that because it's not good for business. And Jerry Falwell's like, well, you got to do it. We got to fight the liberals, right? We got to do this. But he's actually literally, he calls like somebody in the White House or the State Department or the CIA or somebody, right? So then he ends up getting this dirt, which is what, of course, all those evangelicals do, right? They all leak the dirt on each other. So he ends up getting this dirt on Jim Bakker. And that's how he tries to cajole him into making his ministry be part of the moral majority political stuff. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. And so he calls Jerry Falwell's bluff. Then, of course, it comes out in the press and he gets exposed that he's, he's moving all this money to build a freaking Christian Disneyland. I'm not joking, right? So he's going to build, and he does. He builds Christian Disneyland, which in the 80s becomes the third biggest theme park in America. And you're watching, it was called something like Heritage Land or Heritage USA, and it's so bizarre. And he would have these telethons where he would sell Jesus junk. And by the way, Jim Bakker made a comeback, if you didn't notice, right? Like he was on YouTube like a couple years ago selling the slot buckets, right? And I'm sure you guys have all seen the slot bucket viral video, right, from Vic or whoever, which was really funny. But they're talking blood moons, they're talking economic collapse, and slot buckets, right? Wouldn't it be funny too if like Jim Bakker ends up being right? Like we do have an economic collapse, and so like all the only people that survive are the people that bought his food prepper slot buckets. And remember, he's eating it out of the bucket. It's awesome, right? Awesome sequence. Anyway, all of that just to say that I'm going to start selling you guys slot buckets, right? He's literally selling what looks like Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, orphan slop. And he's eating it on camera. And the boomers are eating it up. Like, they love it, dude. They're like, ah, ah. So imagine being like a giant con man and you just go away for 10 years and then you can just come back. Like you just come back on the internet. I think Jim Bakker did 8 years in jail for diverting the money from all these stupid telethons to whatever. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't believe, I think something else is going on. I mean, that's my suspicion. When I see these things now, it's like, okay, what operations were being run through this giant Jim Bakker thing, right? So as we've seen, and as we all know, so many of these mega churches, by the way, and you can look this up too, because we didn't go too deep into this, but many of these mega churches are fronts for money laundering. So it's not just, I think most normies think, oh, those are just money hungry, money grubbing preachers. No, that's not all that's going on. In some cases it is. But some of these things are actually connected to that deep state of being, baby. You know what I mean? And some of these things are literal cutouts and fronts for money laundering, for even at times weapons trafficking. Now, we've seen that with cults. I don't think many people have a problem realizing that a lot of cults are fronts for these things. Remember Osho stuff. Osho documentary had, these jets are flying weapons all over the world. That had to be something, right? Something's there going on with that kind of stuff. Om Shinriko, another one of these cults, clearly has to be some kind of front, trafficking in bioweapons, weapons, etc. And we've covered the cults so many times. And other cults, right, we know for a fact that are connected to that deep state of being, aka Hubbard and the Office of Naval Intelligence, CIA, all that stuff, right? So, granted, what we don't know is how close the relationship is at times between the intelligence apparatchiks and these fronts, shells, churches, mega churches, how controlled they are, whether they are co-opted later, whether they're just compromised, whether they're assets, whether they're just sometimes maybe informants for different agencies. Maybe they're secretly working with FEMA. Remember the program, FEMA recruiting pastors 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, who knows, right? It's hard to know in every case specifically what the relationship between, TV preacher X and the agency Y is. But whether those connections are there constantly as another pattern is 100% factual. And what you start to notice is something I noticed what's his name? Huxley says, if you watch the Huxley lectures, where Huxley's talking about the Berkeley lectures, right? There's one point where he says that, we really studied in depth the tradition of revival preachers. And I'm going from memory, but I want to say he makes some connection maybe even between them and the shaman. And the idea of the TV preacher as a kind of shaman, as a kind of channeler, right? I mean, that's not too far-fetched because, Leary saw himself as continuing the shamanic tradition to be the shamanic priest to boomers and all those people to get them into to tune out, turn whatever, drop out, whatever his phrase is, right? So the shaman is kind of an evangelist. And for some of the esoteric groups like Crowley types, they actually think that the Pentecostal charismatic tradition is actually a kind of almost Crowleyan type of thing because they believe that it's a better route to possession. I'm not joking. This is their view. If you do that kind of just emotive kind of like, because it's like the voodoo type of ceremony where you're immediately getting possessed. And that's the goal of supposedly all these charismatics. So the Spirit of the Lord is going to come on me and I'm going to dance and I'm going to roll and I'm going to act like a dog and I'm going to bark and I'm going to giggle and right? And that's a form of possession, at least from the esoteric perspective. When they look at these groups, they're like, this is no different than voodoo, right? This charismatic Brownsville revival crap is the same as the voodoo. And the idea is that it's an immediate, right, inspiration taking you over. Shamanic tradition, voodoo tradition, right? Same ideas there. The immediate possession by something else. Well, somebody said I need a humidifier. So what happened was we just got all this snow. So now the air is super dry. So it was like super rainy and wet, soggy bottom boy over here. And now everything is frozed and dry. So it just happened. Anyway. So what you start to notice is that these charismatic megataster TV preacher evangelicals are doing the same scam in a different way. It's like shaman tradition for boomers, for old white people. That's what this is, right? I mean, just think of Pat Robertson. I mean, it's so ridiculous. You know what he would do, right? Like he would be like, I'm praying right now. The Lord's saying somebody needs to be healed from gout. Put your hand on the screen. And you're thinking, how does anybody fall for this? But these are techniques, tactics, tricks that can be perfected by people who know what they're doing, is what I'm trying to say. And they will study ancient religions, shamanic traditions, and they'll find the same patterns. Anyway, so anyway, this story was crazy, but it actually is implied, as I said, that there's a deep state of being thing going on that leads to the downfall of your boy Jim. And that is not far-fetched. And, you know, it made me think of the other TV preachers, too. If you don't remember, we did a really good podcast a few years ago about evangelical end times nonsense, where we went into the rapture and we went into all these silly doctrines that are just totally made up. And we talked about how Lindsay predicted the rapture in 1988, but he bought all this Malibu real estate. So it's like, well, the rapture's coming, but, you know, like, in case I don't get taken, I mean, I want to have like a, you know, nice little section over there in Malibu, just in case it's, you know, me and the hellions are left after the rapture, right? Which, come on, dude, right? And how many times do cults like predict the end and it doesn't happen, and they revise the prophecy? But the pattern is the same for all these goobers. That's what we're trying to say, right? All the TV preachers have a pattern and a marketing and they come, I don't know, man. They come out of a factory or something. It's weird, dude. It's weird. It's a weird confluence of Americanism, marketing and capitalism, media, consumerism, right? Because a lot of these mega churches model their whole thing on selling Jesus junk, right? Which is just weird. Like, here, I don't know. Anyway. Oh, I forgot the Rick Warren too. We covered that. Rick Warren was in publicly CFR, right? Obama's pastor, Rick Warren, Purpose Driven Life. I mean, if you can't figure out, right, that these people are literal just plants, or I don't even know. Like, it's fascinating to try to like, how would this go about, right? Do you think that most of these people, like, maybe they start out sincere and then at a certain point they kind of go nuts, right? Like, it's like when they get to a certain point of maybe success, especially if maybe they grew up poor, like both Jim Bakker and Tammy Faye did. They grew up poor, so when suddenly they're getting like tens of millions of dollars a year back in the 70s and 80s, maybe they just went crazy. But there's another element to this which I want to bring to the fore, which you will appreciate, which is that in the case of Tammy Faye, I don't know about Jim, but because the movie is about her. In the case of her, do you know why she went nuts? If you've seen the movie, right? Well, obviously it could be the emotional stuff when she was young, and the sudden success, all this money, and they're kind of unstable people when they get a whole bunch of money. That's just a bad mix. Well, it turns out she was put on all these pills. There we go. Now, what do we see in the shamanic tradition? The use of drugs, exactly. And I'm not saying that Tammy Faye Bakker's a shaman. She's not a priestess, but it's like the American version of this. That's what I'm trying to say. And it has all the hallmarks of the shaman scam, so to speak, just applied to those Americanist ideas that I was mentioning. And so she had this obsession with Diet Coke. She would always have a Diet Coke with her. Maybe that was product placement. I don't know. Maybe she got paid to do that. It's very bizarre, but she was always downing Diet Cokes and her pills. And I don't remember if it said which, but it was all these pills and presumably maybe even early versions of the antidepressants. And I think they said barbiturates. Who knows, dude? Who knows what pills? Well, so in some of the shows, I guess she would just pass out from pills. So that was pretty wild, right? So she just falls over and they just keep going. The show keeps going. And by the way, Tammy Faye is like tame compared to who's the woman on TBN with the giant cotton candy, the giant ball of cotton candy? Jan Crouch. Dude, she like went to the level beyond Tammy Faye. Dude, she could be Tammy Faye in all this. Like she taught, I don't know how, but I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say about that. But to the point of the pharmaceuticals, she basically just had a breakdown, right? She cracked after all this, and then when the information was leaked about Jim and when his downfall happened, she divorced him, and then she moved on to marry some other dude that had something to do with their fake Christian Disney World or whatever. But it's just sad to see the Christianity have that kind of stuff going on. Like, it's just another kind of thing that's part of the atheism factory, right? That we've been talking about in some of these streams. And of course, yeah, the film is told from that kind of far leftist perspective, but overall, it's interesting in light of what we've been talking about lately with the evangelical mega churches and TV preachers. So, once again, another thing, a movie, people are saying, I'm doing more movie analyses. Well, there you go. I love my movie analyses. So, is the American TV preacher nothing but the Caucasian boomer shaman? Is that the analog that we derive here? I think there's something to that. And I don't remember the exact, I don't know if Huxley mentions shamans, but he mentions revival preachers being used in crowd manipulation he says the New World Order is going to use revival preachers in the way their techniques and their tactics of manipulation to bring in NWO. And there's such a close parallel between these revivalist preachers, the origins of the charismatic movement, the Azusa Street, all that crazy stuff, and the shamanic tradition in terms of the praxis, the manipulation, the emotional roller coasters, the get you to come down and have this experience, which is supposed to be this life-changing thing, and it's all manufactured, right? It's all based on just emotions. Well, there's a lot of things that can cause emotions, right? But that's not enough. We need more than just feeling these emotions. Anyway, so hopefully you like this introductory topic. Just a couple things I was reading. I thought about talking about the Phoenix program, but we're going to talk about this book in the near future because I'm really enjoying it. Finally getting into the depths of in what way the Vietnam theater was used as a lot of R&D and experimentation, especially in terms of the technocracy. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. Let's read these super chats. And if you want to support me, another thing you can do is help yourself, right? So I'm going to do my little bit of TV revival preaching right now, selling not Jesus junk, but where's my stuff at? Should I start my own megachurch? Maybe. We'll see. I'm trying to figure out. I've been studying Paul Washer and Mark Driscoll and Pat Robertson and all these heroes, American heroes, trying to figure out how to start my mega cult, mega church cult. Because everybody says, oh, he's a cult leader. It's like, yeah, that's actually, I was saying for a long time, like, if I start my cult, how do we set it up? I'm joking, by the way. People can't tell jokes. When you're joking. If you want to start a cult, you want to move down to Costa Rica. You want to move down to Ecuador. If you want to have a harem and you want to start your cult, well, you're going to need mojo. You're going to need a lot of testosterone. You're going to need a lot of energy for that harem. And how are you going to do that without chalk.com, right? So all you potential cult leaders out there, I'm joking. This is not for cult leaders. I was just joking. I'm going to do it Pat Robertson style. How's that? You want? Or I could do it like Paul Washer. Friends, you're not going to find your masculinity in anything but chalk.com. Friends, if you go over to chalk.com right now, you're not going to be barren this year. That seed of faith, friends, can turn into a tree of blessing. Who else? I did the Pat Robertson. Somebody out there's got low mojo. I want you to just up that mojo. Get on over to chalk.com right now. Right now. In order, use that promo code of J60. JAY60 to get 60% off. Now, some people said, give me 66.6% off. And I says, no, that's the devil. Anyway, John Hagee, that's another one. I always forget John Hagee. Friends, do you want 66.6% off? Do you want to get rid of those devil charges? Friends, you can now eat any of the 12 blood moons in terms of the blood moon pies that you want. Friends, you're going to have such a high metabolism. You could eat blood moons for dinner. You could eat blood moons for breakfast. You could eat blood moons for brunch. You could eat blood moons for second breakfast like those cute little hobbit boys did. Friends, you could do it all if you just get some chalk.com right now. Action 2.0. Brother John Hagee recommends the Tomcat. My wife loves that Tomcat. I'm a beast when it comes to the... Never mind, I'm not going to say that. I'm a beast when it comes to the sack. And that's because of that Tomcat. 60% off J60. Go over there and do that right now. You just heard Paul Washer, John Hagee, and Pat Robertson tell you in perfect preacher energy that's how you're going to make it through the year. Did you know that if there's an economic collapse and you don't have storable food, you could live on chalk alone for at least probably 5 days. You don't even need water. I'm joking, by the way. That's a joke. Let's read some of these super chats. You can get your chalk right there. And by the way, as you know, their stuff is all 100% organic, 100% rainforest sourced. It is all totally high quality stuff. I've been using it for at least 2 or 3 months now. I love it. Jamie loves it. It has probably increased my IQ by at least 70 points, as you guys can tell. And also, if you want to support the live stream, the show, you can do that through the super chats. Now, I think the way we're going to have to do this is that, all right, so we're going to keep doing part twos the way that we normally been doing the long form talks. So there will be the long form talks each week on the website and on Rokfin as well. So separate content, separate audiences in terms of the deals. So nothing's changing for those that are worried about, well, am I going to get access to everything? Maybe you're Erica Barra, you're one. Am I going to get access to everything? How am I going to get access to all of Jay's beautiful content? Don't worry, Eric, you will. I promise. I promise you that. Harold says for $1, friend, do Paul Washer for us. Harold, you're not going to like my Paul Washer. I got to get it to where he starts crying. That's the best part. J Poppy, $10. Can you briefly outline an argument and what points you would make if you were trying to convert a charismatic Christian to orthodoxy? Yeah, I would talk about Isaiah 28, if I go from memory, is talking about it being actual languages as a sign to first century Israel. So when Acts 2 happens, it's nothing to do with gibberish and rolling around on the floor like an idiot. It's a sign of known languages so that Jews could see that this was the fulfillment of Pentecost. Also, you could look at the fact that Pentecost is the reversal of Babel. And so if it's the reversal of Babel, then it's actually, that proves also that it's known languages, hence the miracle. You could look at the fact that when Paul talks about praying in the Spirit, in the Orthodox view, that's the nous, right? That's not gibberish. That's not rolling around the floor and babbling. Paul says that the worship of God is according to what's orderly. God is not the author of chaos. And he's talking about worship. Hence, liturgical worship. Okay? So, those are the easiest things I would point out. But you could go to, Father Seraphim Rose's book, Orthodoxy, the Religion of the Future. That also covers the problems of the charismaticism. J Poppy, $10. On a video a few weeks ago, you had another dude who mentioned that without using the Septuagint, Jesus could not be in line with the priesthood of Melchizedek. I don't remember that quote, but I mean, the way that we know Jesus is the priest according to Melchizedek is both what Genesis 14 and Hebrews, right? Chapter 7. So I don't see why the Septuagint would require that. Although that is, of course, the official Old Testament of the Orthodox. I don't see that necessary connection. I haven't found much on this topic. I hope you could elaborate. Yeah, I don't know much on that either. Just read Hebrews. Green Feathers, $10. JD is the best. Thank you. What would we name our church? What would we name our let's see, with the most successful ones have to have that corporate structure where they get like a corporate logo and it's like Love Point, Cross Point, Seeds of Faith. It's always farming analogies. We call it the farm. Get it? Because that's like the CIA. Or Animal Farm. The Barnyard. I have my mega church in a big barn, and we call it the Barnyard. And I'll preach on top of a tractor. I bet I get a bunch of country people up in there. There's cowboy churches, right? You've heard of this. If you drive through Texas, you will see cowboy church. If you drive through Tennessee, there's biker church. Okay, so there's biker church and cowboy church, which is weird. But Hawksaw Jim Duggins for $10. Oh, he says, have you heard of the Immortality Key, Secret History of Religion with No Name? The author is a Catholic from a Jesuit university and is trying to connect. Oh, by the way, obviously Jesuit, long-time connection to the CIA. That was an obvious one I forgot to mention there. So in other words, we talked a lot about Jesuits and Catholics. We talked about KGB, bishops in the Soviet Union. We've talked about cults and intelligence agencies. But a lot of people overlook evangelicals and intelligence agencies. A good book for this, by the way, is there's several chapters in William Engdahl's book, Whom the Gods Lost Hegemon. And what he does is he compares the model of intelligence agencies co-opting things like the Fatah Gulen movement, and that Gulen was some kind of CIA network through Islamic schools and soft power foreign influence. And then also the evangelical groups like Campus Outreach and others that have been funded by the Pentagon, the State Department. That's, by the way, why Coney 2012. Do you remember Coney 2012? That was the reason that all the evangelical groups on campuses hopped on to promoting Coney 2012. That was when I was starting to figure this stuff out. Remember that? I had already read about it in 2007, 8, 9. But I saw it in action when I saw all the campus groups promoting Coney 2012. And I'm like, dude, all these evangelical goobers are always piety signaling about how they are above politics and they don't touch the political realm. And then suddenly they're all part of this just totally transparent cutout shell front campaign for the Pentagon, for AFRICOM, of Coney 2012. Is like, dude, are you serious? You guys are always talking about how you don't care about politics, you don't care about geopolitics, and then you're sitting here doing a freaking Pentagon op. It's just naive, silly people. So I don't know about that book, The Secret History of Religion with No Name. It's trying to connect the sacrament with the pagan idea of, I guess you're talking about Christian sacraments being linked to hallucinogens. This is a really fanciful theory. No, I think that's a nonsense Gnostic theory. That's actually, I think, promoted by the archaic revival CIA type people, right? That's the thing that the McKennas and the Learys and all this crowd promotes that as part of that, CIA narrative. And don't forget, it's also, Crowley was a big drug fiend, drug pusher person too. So I would be skeptical of that. Frankie D, $10. Do you think that Depop puppeteers are continuing or communing with demons? It's possible. I think some of the people who do like John C. Lilly, he claims that he was, but he could be lying, so I don't know. But I think it's possible, given my bad trips. I think it's possible. Let Ro Jogan and J Lex talk about Clockwork Elves. Yeah, well, we've done many videos and live streams that talks about that as well. For people that are on DMT, do these drugs allow people to peer into the spiritual realm and talk to demons? Yes, I've seen it firsthand. Evan Schultz, $10. Can you remember the time that you went on that show, 2012? It wasn't 2012. I didn't go on any. First time I went on a podcast was like 2014 or 15. I think. Unless time has just gone way faster than I knew. But maybe it did. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. I don't remember when that was. Vibranium, $5. Does the book discuss the Oracle of Delphi? Which book? I forgot what book I was talking about. Oh, the Shaman? No, I think it's like more indigenous type shamanic stuff. It may later on in the book. It's a giant book. It's like 600 pages. I haven't read the whole thing, but so maybe later on he'll get to the Oracle of Delphi. But that's this chick sitting on rocks huffing gas, dude. Did you know that in the ancient world? Chicks would just go sit in a cave and huff gas. Sometimes Jamie feels that way when I've been eating chili. Ha 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 ha. Boomer joke. Orthodox Prepper, $5. Hey, Happy New Year. What do you think trying to build an IRL community deep in America? There's plenty of Orthodox people that are trying to build more homesteady communities out in the country. I think that's a good idea because there's a good chance that we could see things collapse, right? So you need to get your slot buckets, right? I'm just kidding. Go watch Jim Bakker slot buckets. Yeah, it's a good idea. Frankie D, $5. I saw a trailer for a series called Righteous Gemstones. Yeah, it's great. If you've not seen that, it's hilarious. Yeah, I'm sure that they based that show on just kind of a conglomeration of all these wild TV preachers. Mean Joe Hicks, $5. Have you heard of Michael Greger? Now he is called Vishnu Das from Liturgist. Is that dude that I critiqued the Vedic Jesus dude? Do you remember that video? We did a video of Vedic Jesus where that guy was trying to say Jesus was a yogi or whatever. It was so ridiculous. I did a 2-hour critique of that video. Just type J Dyer Vedic Jesus or whatever. Is that Michael? I don't even know. I don't know who Michael Greger is. I don't remember that guy's name. If it was, what was it? Vishnu Das? I don't remember that, but maybe. He's an evangelical, got interested in Orthodoxy, started taking psychedelics, and now is a
megalomaniac cult leader. You know, one of the things that happens to the people that do all these dumb drug trips is that they think they're going to be, they then think God's speaking to them, and then they're on this mission, either in the realm of cults or in the realm of Christianity, right? And they become their own, they want to be their own little cult leader, and they think that they're on this mission from God, and it's really just delusion. Evan Schultz, $5. If you haven't seen it, the Marjo documentary from the late 70s about scammer Pentecostal preachers, relevant clips are on YouTube. Yeah, and Gooster or Greedo in the Discord sent me a long 4-hour thing about the TV preachers and the TBN people, like the Kenneth Copeland and all those word of faith, seed money scam people. Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar, holla, Creflo Dollar. There's a whole thing on them that I haven't watched yet, but I will have to write that down. Marjo. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. If you want full access to all the content, go to Jay's Analysis and subscribe over there for $4.95 a month, $6 a year. Or you can subscribe also over at Rokfin under my name, J. Dyer Rokfin. It's a great free speech-based platform. You can also follow me on all the socials, as you know about. And look for lots and lots and lots of content. Tell your friends.